Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has stated that the onus is now on China to reduce trade tensions, highlighting their significant exports to the United States. He believes the current high tariffs are unsustainable, emphasising that progress is being made to negotiate with various countries, particularly India, which may soon reach a trade deal. Bessent also mentioned that European nations might be worried about the euro's strength, which has surged nearly 10% this year against the dollar. For more, let's bring in Oz Sultan from Sultan Interactive Group. We've been watching this tit-for-tat display, particularly between China and the United States. Has the US flinched first?
I don't think it's really an issue of flinching here. I mean, when you look at these kind of resets, you really have to look back historically. And the last time something like this happened, Nixon was in office. The Vietnam War was winding down, right? So we haven't really reset a couple of things. We haven't reset the yuan. The yuan is still pegged at levels it was after World War II. We haven't reset that favored nation status, but it looks like Trump has wound that down. And then the third portion of this is tariffs on classes of goods. And I think given the fact that Apple has already come to the White House and is talking about moving most of their Foxconn manufacturing to India, that there's a number of additional producers, very large producers that export to America already in that process as well. I think this is a little bit of a game of wait and see with the Chinese. Because I think, most of our industries can wait this out for a couple of months. It's not going to really be much of a problem if it's one quarter, but if it lasts more than 2 quarters, this is going to be a huge issue. So that's sort of the strategy that I see from the insiders I'm speaking to in Washington. Secondarily, I would think that in addition to these, larger classes of goods, the smaller classes of goods, the Temu goods, the Shine goods that have been flooding American markets for years, the loophole in taxes was eliminated for them. So, those all of a sudden have become tremendously expensive and people are looking for alternatives. So it's an interesting state of affairs.
It certainly is, and you mentioned about how waiting it out, but we're hearing from Target, we're hearing from Walmart that shelves will soon be empty. We're hearing from people at the Port of Seattle that there are no ships there at all. China has everything to lose. It's got a population that became middle class. It has a communist regime that's only in power so long as the population stays middle class. They will have to fight this one out, surely.
They definitely will. Their reciprocal tariff increase on American goods is going to have a definite downturn market effect in this quarter. But I don't think that this could last much longer than that. We've already seen, falling of the yuan versus international currencies. This is going to affect the BRICS in terms of how they plan on, de-dollarizing, and I don't think they will be able to. And at the same token, it's going to make, goods that America produces that China consumes, which is largely manufacturing goods that are going into new mills, things like that, extremely prohibitive to purchase. So we're talking about market growth slowdown in China. We're talking about production slowdown in China. We're talking about currency devaluation in China. And the question is, are they willing to play gunboat diplomacy going into the fall, or will they settle this, before July?
It's interesting you mentioned India earlier, and we have seen Apple announcing that they'll be moving production of the iPhone to India for US customers, as in the iPhones that get sent to the US, although they won't be able to do the 20th anniversary one. Apparently it will be so technical it still needs to be done in China, is the latest tea we're hearing from Bloomberg on that. But is India a reliable partner? I mean, it's the eye in BRICS. It seems to play all sides, and while it might be a place where JD Vance visited last week, we have seen Narendra Modi, he's visited President Putin. He seems to play all sides. Do you think that the West should be putting all its eggs in the India basket?
I think from a manufacturing perspective, look, we've got plenty of manufacturing that's still in Bangladesh, that's mostly clothing. But this big shift of technology manufacturing to India is going to give us at least a midterm runway into the 2040s on reduced costs of manufacturing. It also deals with some of the ethical concerns that we've had with China, specifically with Uyghur slave labor, with forced labor, as well as, some of the complaints that Americans have seen in notes that are shoved inside of goods and things like that, where we're trapped in factories. A lot of these things become assuaged. At the same time, you reduce a huge portion of those manufacturing costs, partly due to tariffs, but then also partly due to the nature of how these rare resources are being sourced and put into these products. It's mostly high tech products, mostly semiconductor and chip based products.
All right. Now, President Trump is set to sign a new executive order targeting sanctuary cities and states that do not fully comply with federal immigration laws. The order will require the Attorney General and the Homeland Security Secretary to compile a list of such jurisdictions within a month. Those named could face cuts in federal funding and legal repercussions for failing to align with federal policies. The move comes in the wake of recent legal challenges thwarting Trump's previous efforts to penalise the area's administration officials, while they are now asserting that they will continue to push for stricter immigration enforcement. Here's Caroline Levitt from the White House.
Today, we kick off 100-day week with a focus on the president's historic effort to secure our southern border. Later this afternoon, President Trump will sign an executive order on law and order and another executive order on sanctuary cities. The first EO will strengthen and unleash America's law enforcement to pursue criminals and protect innocent citizens. The second EO is centered around protecting American communities from criminal aliens, and it will direct the Attorney General and Secretary of Homeland Security to publish a list of state and local jurisdictions that obstruct the enforcement of federal immigration laws.
Oz Sultan is joining us to discuss all this. They have been promising big action on the border and now focusing on sanctuary cities. For those outside of the US, just explain again what sanctuary cities actually are.
A sanctuary city is basically a city that's designated itself as a safe haven for folks that cross the border illegally or are reasonably undocumented in how they've gotten to the United States. This is most of your large cities: New York, where I am, Chicago, Los Angeles, and a few other large northern cities really kind of constitute that list. Over the course of the past 2 decades, and this goes all the way back through the Obama administration and into the Bush administration, you've had these cities basically saying we will not turn over, certain illegals to ICE. And the term illegal here refers to anyone who has crossed the border without appropriate documentation. They've all committed a crime, at least in the eyes of the law. What we're running into is these challenges where New York is saying, that I'm just going to use New York, for example, because the rest of the cities kind of echo this. These folks made this tough journey here. We should figure out a path to citizenship. But that path to citizenship has been something that we've been arguing about in the United States for 40 years. There isn't really a clear path outside of DACA, which is largely for children coming across the border. And now as they're digging into this, they're finding there was a ton of improprieties in terms of just even figuring out whose kid was whose under the Biden administration. So I think the focus here is, one, let's get the illegals out. 2, let's clean up this process. And then 3, we can deal with legal paths to citizenship, legal immigration, and asylum cases in a more effective manner. But right now, it's just been backlogs in courts and things that don't get done and policy that doesn't work. And this Trump impact right now is going to be relatively significant, specifically if he starts cutting federal funding.
Yes, the federal funding cuts, but we've seen legal repercussions as well. This idea of the federal policies versus what the states and the cities are doing. Talk to us about that.
So take, for example, New York. I think, don't hold me to these numbers, but I think our last budget was somewhere around $86 billion to run the city. That's just the city of New York, right? So what would happen is that the Fed could cut somewhere between $8 to $12 billion of funding, much of which had been allocated to sanctuary benefits for illegal aliens over the course of the past 8 years in our city, right? This was under de Blasio. This was continued under Adams. And the challenges that we have are, you know, if you come into Harlem, where I am, and our poor neighborhoods, I can't get Section 8 housing dispensation for locals. We can't get the same food stamp benefits that illegals are getting. We can't get the child credit benefits that illegals are getting. Yet you have these folks that just crossed the border. They haven't lived here their entire lives, and they're taking down anywhere between $1,400 to $5,000 a month in benefits plus free housing. It's just unfair to American citizens. It's unfair to Black and Brown communities. And the commingling of illegals with our sort of local, you'd call them indigenous communities, is really where a lot of this problem has been, you know, grown out of. And that's not to mention, you know, the MS-13 and Tren de Agua issues that we're having with new, more violent gangs coming in from south of the border and, you know, taking over buildings in many cases in sort of New Jack City style.
All right, it's a big one to watch. Oz Sultan, appreciate your insights here on Ticker. Thank you.
Thank you.